So where are you taking me to lunch?
I know, isn't it sad?
Listen, I like steak, so
I would have been happy with Pita Pit,
no,
okay?
you take me to lunch.
Okay, fine.
I'll try to remember to remind people.
That would be more useful.
And I'll try to remember.
Kay's in charge, so.
Okay, she never makes a mistake.
All right, good, good.
She will
I can-
remember. Okay.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
I thought you were waving at me, then I realized my camera wasn't on. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, yeah. Too many nights at home not doing anything. Get involved. You know, it's not the same as at home. It's just-
Hey guys, is Mike Marsh in the room?
Nobody's in the
No,
building.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm getting a call.
What was that last thing, Rachel?
Yep.
Getting the call. How are you?
I'm good, how are you doing?
Just fine.
All settled in now,
Yes,
Are you, I mean, is Sue even still around, or is she fully
she
retired?
is. And she'll be around through the end of the year.
Just, oh, the end of the year. Okay.
Yep, so she's part-time now, but she's
You
still,
feeling the weight lifted off her shoulders this year? Feel a little-
I think a little bit, yes. Maybe I didn't recognize you. It's okay, it's hard with these. Yeah, how are you, Sandy? Fine, how are you? Just fine. Good.
So, operating off the- Do you want to process people? So, tell me exactly how to pronounce your last name. Where are they gonna go? Yeah, that's why I have to keep it here and then they can just do the sides. Is that okay? Or I can stand if you can sit here. How are you? How are you? Okay.
About to ask what today was, and it's the day I've been looking forward to for 7 months. Or the day before, I've been looking forward to for 7 months.
So we wait to look at them.
The left,
Yeah, you have to do.
You know what, John, I'm a little hungry for my.
The day after it snowed.
Yes. I'm thinking of our dinner we always have, when we can't get together and eat.
If you want to look
I never
at
eat
them as
meat.
well as them, you have to.
Oh, you can pick it up.
Yeah, we'll be there after this.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
we'll try.
Text Zicker.
You
If
can
I
try.
needed it, was a donation.
Maybe they can give it to someone else.
Yeah.
I sure will. Okay.
Haven't been through.
Build the thing so long before.
Yeah.
And
Great.
the doctor that you mentioned has to be the doctor that reviewed the.
Good.
Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised.
Wow, good.
Oh, they like to have it on the side.
Which grandbaby was it? What was the number? The fellow was filling in for you in your office, could remember it was 11 or 12 or. I'm sorry?
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Gee, what's everybody doing here?
For you?
We're meeting tonight? Well, rumor has it.
One of these.
They did a terrific job. I'll tell you what. He was utterly-
Okay, I get the idea.
Oh, well, then anything positive to say.
There was one right before us, and I'm assuming somebody right after, so the line hits. But, you know, with the house, we're gonna have to, so many things. A year and a half. So many things. No problem.
So you didn't get the mashed potatoes, Sam?
No, I just made it. You know, if they wouldn't put this next thing, fairly hard one, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You fill up a couple where,
Yeah.
styrofoam with a lot of mashed potatoes.
Table that tonight, because as I look at it, there's two or three other spots out there.
I can't believe I forgot all about it.
I got their number, I called them someone else. But it's a little late.
Yeah, I just texted exactly, he might be there, just, yeah, stay all the time, you know.
I know.
I hate to do it.
I don't think he would be there because they didn't sit down and meet.
Yeah, just 5 minutes, for sure.
Try when you.
Yeah, I'll just stop over there.
Do we have cool music that plays online while we're waiting?
No.
I can turn on my phone real loud.
Broadcast.
All right. We're not fancy at all. Did you tell Lori?
It's so funny when you're recording.
Yes, that's okay. Okay. All right.
I'm looking forward to more than one thing starting tomorrow.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're still.
No.
That is all.
Would you please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Kate, could you call the roll?
Carol,
Here.
Hollenbach,
Here.
Leontis,
Here.
Fitz,
Here.
Robinette,
Here.
Roland. Here. Zanfordino.
Here. Okay, the minutes from our October 19th meeting were distributed prior. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? All right, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Correspondence. Okay, do we have correspondence?
Yes. Distributed to you prior to the meeting this evening was a listing of budget transfers to be made for the month of November, and those require your approval.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the budget transfers? So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All righty.
And then also, this was distributed to you last week, and there's copies before you. A couple of appointments to city boards and commissions as requested by the mayor. First one would be to the Historic Preservation Commission, Chris Moen for a one-year term ending 5/31/21. Jamie Alt to the Traffic Commission for a two-year term ending 5/31/22. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, Matthew Bostor for a two-year appointment ending 5/31/22. And those require your approval.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved for all three.
Okay.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor of the appointment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, I would like to thank all three of these individuals for giving of themselves to the city of Bowling Green. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay. Before we move on to lobby visitations, we have some members of the Historic Preservation Commission that are here tonight. They've been working very hard and would like to go forward with making Bowling Green a certified local government. And they are here to give us a little insight on a piece of legislation that's before us tonight. So if you'd like to come up.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Please state your name, please.
My name is John Sampson. I'm the chair of the Historical Preservation Commission. And we do have two other members here with me today, Wes Barber and Will Bush. So we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak with the City Council this evening. As you may know, the Historic Preservation Commission was established last year by former Mayor Dick Edwards with the charge of helping celebrate Bowling Green's rich historic heritage. Just for fun, we'd like to share with you a few important historic facts and photos from the past. This is a map of our town from 1888. And our nearly 200-year history includes the draining of the Great Black Swamp in 1860 and our Boomtown housing expansion, which dates back to 1887. In our efforts to help preserve our heritage, the HPC, or the Historic Preservation Commission, hopes to establish in our community a certified local government. In 1916, the U.S. Congress established the National Park Service within the Department of the Interior to be the steward not only of our national parks, but also of our monuments and historic objects. 50 years later, in 1966, Congress enacted the National Historic Preservation Act, significantly increasing the scope and responsibilities of the National Park Service, including its resources of historic public and private buildings and homes. In Ohio, a specific implementation of these responsibilities was established in 1985 when the National Park Service approved a program in our state called the Certified Local Government Programs, enabling towns and cities to enact historic preservation ordinances which establish the legal basis for preserving and enumerating the standards which will apply to preservation efforts. The State Historic Preservation Office in Columbus shares joint responsibility with the National Park Service for administering this program. This CLG helps identify and protect historic sites and structures, as well as offering financial resources such as tax credits and grant money. So a major HPC goal for this past year has been to draft a CLG, or Certified Local Government. We're excited now to present to City Council our proposed document. In Ohio, there are already 78 certified local governments, including every major university town except Bowling Green. We're hopeful that Bowling Green will soon join these other communities in passing the ordinance. In spite of our nation's extraordinary and terrible experience with the current COVID pandemic, we believe that the adoption of this CLG ordinance will represent a special moment of hope, opportunity, and civic pride for our city and community. I would now invite Les Barber to highlight a few key points and benefits as you begin the process of reviewing and considering our proposal. Thank you.
Les Barber, 303 North Prospect. On the benefits and importance of this legislation in BG, I'd like to add something to the items on slide 6. All residents of Bowling Green take real pride in the distinctive and historic architecture in our city, both in the downtown and in the older areas, especially those that are most heavily trafficked by residents and visitors alike. We take this pride not just for our own sense of pleasure at living in a community with a distinctive history, which I think we do, but also because we recognize how important the historic feel of our city is to groups, like, for example, parents of prospective BGSU students and visitors from out of town who come here for our restaurants, shops, and for business at the Wood County Courthouse. This means that the appearance of our downtown and the historic corridor areas is critical. Thank God I could read that without my glasses. These corridor areas, like West Worcester Street, obviously, East Worcester Street, North Main, south of Poe, North Main, what did I say? Yeah, North Main, south of Poe, South Main, north of Napoleon, and the East Court, Prospect Street area around the county courthouse. However, these corridor areas are problematic in a university town like ours. A pattern there has been visible for years. We've talked about it in other contexts. Historic single-family homes are purchased and turned into rental units, while some landlords definitely take pains to preserve the historic features of such homes. Many do not, so that there is a kind of progression of neglect and disintegration. And we do recognize that some family homes have some of the same problems. It's not only landlords. The ordinance is intended in part to stop any further loss in the distinctive historic architecture of Bowling Green. Okay, slide 7, please. Okay, some key points about the ordinance, and the first one is about what it does and especially what it doesn't do. The ordinance in front of you, it's on for first reading tonight, is based on a model that's provided by, and basically it's required by the State Historic Preservation Office. It establishes the standards and rules for designating protected properties in Bowling Green, and it establishes the standards and rules for owners of designated or listed, as we call it in the ordinance, properties, designated or listed historic properties if they subsequently wish to make changes to the exteriors of their buildings. It does not, this really needs to be emphasized, it does not designate or list any property or any district in and of itself. Only after this ordinance is approved by council, and only then, can specific properties or districts be recommended for listing and protection, and all of this only by separate legislation by council following the procedures that you follow for all legislation. So in a very basic sense, this ordinance doesn't change the status of any property in Bowling Green whatsoever. No requirement is or rule is levied on any property owner. The ordinance does only the two things. It fulfills the state and national requirement that the city have such an ordinance in place before proposals for protected properties or districts are considered by the commission and council. And number two, it sets the standards and rules for such subsequent actions by the commission and council, as well as the standards and rules for the treatment of protected properties thereafter. So it does really, I think, only those three things. That's it, three things. On the topic of standards and rules, I want to highlight just a few of the most important ones. And these are the ones that I think you will probably want to make sure that you confirm as you study and consider the document. And these are the rules that would govern historic properties once they are designated. And the first thing that I want to emphasize is we're talking only about the exterior of buildings. There's nothing in this ordinance or in the process that we're planning that has anything whatsoever to do with the interiors of buildings. Second thing is that we decided to simplify everything and avoid possible ambiguities that might arise from trying to write our own standards and rules from scratch. So we are adopting the Secretary of the Interior's, this is a title now, Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties. It's in the appendix of the document. You can read it and pay attention especially to, there are four sets. Pay attention especially to the one called rehabilitation, because that's the one that will govern 99% of anything that would ever come before the commission and council if all of this subsequently happens, this ordinance and then ordinances establishing listed properties and buildings. Okay, some important notes. We modify and soften the standards in a number of ways as specified in this ordinance. Modifications that take precedence over the standards wherever there's any conflict or uncertainty. And we're doing that on purpose because we don't want the standards to be understood to be inflexible. But flexibility is a relative term, so we try to specify as best we can the types of flexibility, the types of softening that we want to prevail in this city. First of all, maybe most important to remember is that even after we have an approved CLG ordinance, this one, and we have subsequent city council approval of specific individual properties and or districts, this ordinance makes it clear that no owners of historic properties will be automatically required to do anything. And this is a little hard to take at first glance, but it's true. The ordinance would not require anybody, even if we get to the stage of having listed properties, to do anything with what exists when the ordinance or when they are listed. If they wish to make no changes and only preserve the work that's there, that will be fine with the ordinance. Preservation is not governed by anything as proposed in this ordinance. It states specifically that preservation as defined in the standards is a matter for property owners to pursue on their own without application for a certificate of appropriateness, as we call it, from the Historic Preservation Commission. And by the way, one of the preservation efforts that's defined as being included as a matter of the owner's choice is the color of a house. We're not into determining house or building colors. Couple more things. We do recognize that many historic properties, buildings especially, will have non-historic exterior features when they're listed. You can think of them easily, things like, well, downtown building awnings, for example, or asphalt shingles on roofs that probably were wood shingles when they were built, aluminum or other sidings, non-wooden doors, windows, that sort of thing. In all of such cases, this ordinance allows preservation of those features, including replacement of small deteriorated sections, without having to come to the commission for any permission or certificate of appropriateness. As long as an in-kind material is being used and it looks the same, then we're not making any rules about that. However, whenever full replacement of such features like these listed is necessary or desired, then the owners would be required to apply for a certificate of appropriateness before beginning the work. And they, according to the ordinance, they must, if possible, replace the features moving in a direction of greater historical authenticity. That doesn't have to be perfect, but at least it has to be moving in the right direction. Can't be worse. Along the same lines, just for downtown people, especially flat roofs, a lot of flat roofs on downtown buildings, they're not visible from what's called a view corridor from the street. You can't see them. So owners can repair and replace those things without approaching the Historic Preservation Commission, as long as they're not changing the elevation or the view corridor. And then I'm getting very close to the end. Sorry, I'm doing the nitty-gritty work here. The legislation does not seek in general to dictate every small detail of alteration, rehabilitation, restoration to a listed property, even to the historic features. In relatively minor matters of historical detail, again, flexibility will be allowed in the certificate of appropriateness process. Examples would be things like choosing energy efficient windows and doors that are not wooden. Okay, if they look more or less like the originals and the owner want to do that, we specify that's okay. There are some others, but I won't go into them. In addition, and this is the last thing I want to say, I think this would be important to a lot of people, at the back of historic buildings, a lot of flexibility about what can be done because they are less visible. So even more contemporary designs of additions at the rear of buildings will not be discouraged by the Historic Preservation Commission. Okay, so that seems to us to be the things that maybe you should be much aware of when you're reviewing the document. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. And I would like to thank you all for the hard work that you've done. John and I were both on the study committee when we were looking at creating a Historic Preservation Commission. And so I'm very excited these number of years later to see that we finally got to a place where we're considering a certified local government. So thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, this brings us to lobby visitations. Do we have anyone signed up for lobby visitations?
Not this evening.
Introduction of new legislation.
Mr. President,
Mr. Zanfordino.
from the Community Improvement Committee, we have an ordinance creating and adopting Chapter 158 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, regarding historic preservation, and amending and adopting certain sections of Chapter 30, 32, 35, 38, 150, and 152 of the Codified Ordinances to reflect changes regarding historic preservation.
And then this is to be referred to the Planning Commission for their consideration, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
That would be referred to after the first reading or now?
At their meeting on Wednesday, they're going to look at it, right?
I'm not sure it's on their agenda.
Mr. President.
Are you guys going to look at this before we give it its final reading?
Our plan was to put it on the December agenda and then
Okay.
set it for a hearing that following month.
So we'll have to table it when
Okay.
it's the third reading.
Okay, so it's in their hands now.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. President, is it in their hands now, or are we going to give it its first reading tonight?
We're going to give it its first reading.
Okay, thank you.
That's all the new legislation. Official reports, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening. I really don't have a specific report, but I did want to express, as Council President Hollenbaugh did, my appreciation for the work of the Historic Preservation Commission. There's been a lot of work that has gone into the legislation that the Council is beginning to consider this evening. As many of you are aware, there was legislation on Council's agenda several years ago, and we got to the point where we were going to give it its third reading, and it was tabled. It was tabled at that time because I think there was a great deal of misunderstanding about what the legislation was and was not going to do. It's clear to me that the members of the Historic Preservation Commission have given great care of reviewing the legislation and bringing a revised piece of legislation to Council for your consideration that addresses many of the concerns that we heard a number of years ago. It's clear that they made great effort to make it flexible. You heard that word a lot this evening. And I just want to commend them for the work that they have done. I think this is an important first step. I look forward to Council's consideration of this legislation. Look forward to hearing any public feedback that we might have on it. And I look forward to signing this legislation if it is approved by Council, because I think it's a very important process. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for the mayor? I guess not. Thank you very much. Municipal Administrator, Ms. Trotter.
Good evening. It's time for your semi-annual reminder to make sure I know all of you council members are on the city's email list to get important news from the city of Bowling Green. But anybody watching, please go to the city's website at bgohio.org. We certainly are sending out a lot of things, and I will compliment the staff. The newsletter's looking really good. It's fun. It provides a lot of great information, and we think it's a great way for citizens to stay up to date with what's going on here at the city of Bowling Green. And one of the reasons that people may want to be watching is that our leaf collection program is going to be launching on November 9th. So that's 1 week from now. Residents do not need to call in about leaves, so it is different from brush. And on our website, we hope to have a map of where we will be, and we'll be making 2 passes of the city once we begin, and then we will announce before we come on the final pass so people are aware of that. So we know we had a lot of wind yesterday. Our phones were ringing a lot today asking that very question. When's leaf collection starting? So I thought a good time to remind you to please sign up at and you can get the information right to your phone, computer, or however else you'd like to get information. The other thing on my agenda this evening, Mr. President, is to request an executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss a real estate matter, and we would not anticipate any action coming out of that. That completes my report, subject to your questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Treader?
Yes, Lori, so will there be 2 or 3 leaf pickups?
2.
2 total. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Planning Director,
No report. Does she have questions?
are there any questions for Ms. Saylor? All right. Let's see, City Attorney, Mr. Marsh.
No report.
Are there any questions for Mr. Marsh? Okay. And as far as I can see, that's the rest of the list. So brings us to council committee reports. Mr. Harrell.
The Transportation and Safety Committee met at 6 o'clock tonight and covered a few items that are related, of course, to transportation and or safety, but also were items that perhaps would have an impact on the formulation of the 2021 budget. So we covered the possibility of speeding up within in a responsible manner implementation of a body camera system for the Bowling Green Police Division. We also recommended that the sidewalk bicycle path or multi-use path from the Bowling Green High School area to the community center as well as Cogan's Crossing be a priority in terms of putting together the engineering, not the construction, but the engineering, so that sometime next year we'll know what it would look like and what it would cost to implement and that path. So those were the major 2 items to be accomplished by the committee.
Okay. Are there any other council committee reports?
Yes, Mr. President. I'd just like to update the council on some upcoming important dates for the Finance Committee. On Monday, November 9th at 5 p.m., there'll be a joint meeting of the Board of Public Utilities and the Finance Committee to review the 2021 utility budget. On Thursday, December 3rd at 5 p.m., the committee will meet again on 2021 non-utility budget items. And then just for everyone's information, the plan for the budget process with the full council will begin with a first reading on December 7th, with the goal of having a second and third reading and a vote on December 21st. I point this out because this year there will not be a separate special end of the year meeting. We will be able to accomplish our budget requirements using the 2 already scheduled December meetings. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other council committee reports?
Yes, Mr. President, just a reminder to all that this Saturday, November 7th at 10 a.m. we'll be resuming our discussion of rental registration / licensing in the chamber here. And it'll just be discussed. It'll be a committee of the whole this time, of course, as opposed to the separate committee. I'm aware there'll be no public input at that meeting. It'll be a discussion amongst the 7 members. But I'm unsure if there will be public allowed to be in the room that night, that morning. Will there be available space for any interested citizens?
Very limited space.
Right. But it will be on.
Yeah, it'll be up on the.
That's the key thing.
And it's been requested that during that meeting on Saturday, since a certain member of the press will not be here, but will be watching it, that we lean into our microphones and talk quite clearly. So,
Excellent time to bring that up.
yeah, well, otherwise I would forget. It's this Saturday.
At 10 a.m.
Okay.
Mr. President, did the member of the press request that every council member do that or just certain council members?
I think it was just sort of a blanket.
Okay, I just wondered if there were some council members they'd rather not hear from.
Well, if you have to ask. Okay, and along those lines also, I asked as chairman of the Community Improvement Committee, I asked that John give us a little summation of the committee's findings at the beginning of that meeting. And I hope to put together a very brief agenda that just sort of outlines what will be happening and hopefully have that emailed to you before Friday. Any other council committee reports? Okay, that brings us to the reading of legislation.
Legislation for first reading. Ordinance number 8878 for first reading. Ordinance creating and adopting Chapter 158 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, regarding historic preservation and amending and adopting certain sections of Chapter 30, 32, 35, 38, 150, and 152 of the Codified Ordinances to reflect changes regarding historic preservation. Legislation for second reading. Ordinance number 8873 for second reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 33.04 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, relative to pay scales for seasonal employees. Ordinance number 8874 for second reading. Ordinance vacating the utility easement at 1438 Pontiac Avenue. Ordinance number 8875 for second reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for supplying annual inventory requirements, underground and overhead lines insurance, sale of scrap materials, and participation in the AMP Joint Purchasing Program in 2021. Ordinance number 8876 for second reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for carbon dioxide chemical feed system at the water treatment plant. Ordinance number 8877 for second reading. Ordinance authorizing the utilities director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts for elevator repairs at the water treatment plant. Legislation for third reading. Resolution number 3778 for third reading. Resolution implementing sections 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code, establishing and describing the boundaries of the Bowling Green Community Reinvestment Area number 7 in the city of Bowling Green and designating a housing officer to administer this program.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
I move to adopt resolution 3778.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Kay, could you call the roll?
Hollenbach,
Yes.
Beyonce,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland, yes, Santino,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Okay, so resolution 3778 is adopted.
Resolution number 3779, the third reading resolution implementing sections 3735.65 through 3735.70 of the Ohio Revised Code, establishing and describing the boundaries of the Bowling Green Community Reinvestment Area number 8 in the city of Bowling Green and designating a housing officer to administer this program.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
I move to table resolution 3779 for until our November 16th meeting. We need an opportunity to review that language one more time.
November 16th.
Yeah.
November 16th, yes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Kate, could you call the roll?
Leontis,
Yes.
Fitz,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland. Yes. Zanfordino,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Hollenbach.
Yes. Okay, so resolution 3779 is tabled until our November 16th meeting.
Ordinance number 8817 was the third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 35.70 of the codified ordinances of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding city fees and fees charged for services.
Mr. President. Mr. Robinette. I move to adopt ordinance 8870.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Okay?
Fitz,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland. Yes. Zanfordino,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Hollenbach.
Yes.
Leontis.
Yes.
All right, so ordinance 8870 is adopted. We will now move into executive session.
Mr. President, prior to that motion being made, just wanted to do what I think you would have normally done, and that is encourage everyone that hasn't voted yet. Important that everyone that hasn't voted yet to vote tomorrow. And there certainly have been many different messages sent out encouraging people to vote. And I would like to think that implied in those multiple messages of exercising your right to vote would be that it be an educated and well-researched vote. So I would encourage everyone do the work to get prepared to vote. I was talking with someone at work today. They mentioned how their college-age son was home and had an absentee ballot and went up to their room, spent an hour just on the internet and going to various websites and really thoroughly researching who this person was going to vote for. And you would think that in today's times, with the abundance of information, that would be easier to find out about people. But I would say that there's an added dimension of the different perspectives that different websites have that, in a sense, might actually make it more difficult to come up with an educated vote. But my message is get out there and vote in a responsible manner. That's how the system runs.
Mr. President. Mr. Robinette.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a brief comment on the current situation with COVID. I received an interesting email tonight from the high school that shoot out to everybody. And it just reminded me of how we could be successful if we put our minds to it. The message regarding the Northern Lakes League, and they just wrapped up their fall sports season in the Northern Lakes League with eight schools. And the comment was that of the varsity sports, 124 of the 127 scheduled varsity sporting events happened. That's just varsity. That doesn't mention the JV and the freshman. The reason I bring that up is it should be a reminder to us that organizations, in this case, a league and a bunch of 8 different athletic directors, they put their minds to it and find ways to make things happen and keep some normalcy in our lives. And I just commend all those folks involved with doing that. That's just one microcosm of it, athletics. But I just saw that report that came out just a couple hours ago, and I just want to commend everyone involved in making that happen and remind all of us that we have an obligation to do everything in our power to keep all of our lives and organizations and events moving forward safely.
All right, is there any other business? I guess we're in the other business to come before council section. So anybody else have anything?
President, I hope that we go into executive session to discuss real estate.
Properly moved and seconded, all in favor?
All in favor.
Roll call. Is it roll call? Yeah. Okay, and we